So I decided to use the air channel strip on my first insert because the air channel strip is kind of a combination of a few things that I'm using commonly already. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to Lifted Noise. My name is Raul. If you haven't been to my channel before, what I do here is MPC live tutorials, beat making videos, and samples. I share those every once in a while. Now, my very first tutorial video on YouTube was about templates in the MPC live, and that was very centered around beat making. Now I want to focus on the mixing side of my template, and because I want to streamline my entire workflow and make beat making and mixing one cohesive process, I'm going to expand on the template that I have already and add a few things like plugins and sending a few pads through submixes. This template is far from complete because I do hope that my workflow has some space to evolve still, but I want to share some of the things that I have in place already in case that there's something in here that might inspire you to get a little bit closer to where you're trying to get. Alright, so to give you a bit of context before I start showing you my mix template, I'm going to go over a little bit of my beat making template so you can understand some of the reasons or what I'm doing here and why I'm applying certain plugins to certain pads. So I create usually in a finger drumming performance, so you see that I have color coded pads right here, and the reason I do that is just because it's more interesting to me. And I may work with key groups. I do work with key groups, say if I'm playing a bass part or an instrument part, but then I'll end up resampling and then applying it to a pad here and then mixing from there, all within these 16 pads. So I try to keep it pretty simple and contained within just one pad bank. This is my drum program. It's my cookie cutter template, and right here I have these all color coded. Now the red pads are all my drums, and these orange ones are like sample cuts, chops, or the main core idea, like a chord progression of my beat. Then I have bass lines right here, and then I'll have other instruments. So I try to keep it down to that. So now I'm going to look at my pad mixer for my program template, and in here is where I have all my plugins set up. This is going to go really quick because I have pretty much the same 4 plugins, and the reason I have the same plugins on all these pads is because I generally do the same thing. This should obviously be the reason why you have a template, because if you're going to go ahead and put the same plugins just about every time, why should you waste your time doing it every time? Just have them in place. And if you need to make changes along the way for every, for whatever that beat may need, then you can go ahead and do that. But just having these things in place is very helpful. So I'm going to take a look. I'm going to go in the insert section and take a look at all the plugins I have set up. All right, so the first plugin I have in here is just kind of a general rule of thumb, and a lot of these mix ideas are, and if you ask mixers, if you go around your research, you'll have them say there's no true rule, but there are some guidelines that are very helpful. So these are some of the things I'm just applying and putting in practice because I learned them in school, and so I'm just trying to get back in that mode of mixing because I've always really just kind of moved away from it because it just wasn't interesting to me. One of the main reasons is because I didn't have a template, I think, and trying to put all these things in every time is very tedious, so I want to avoid that. So here, number one thing, kind of a rule of thumb for most of your tracks, is they'll go ahead and have some kind of a high pass filter. So I put the air filter in there, and then going in, I created myself a preset. So I set that already at a cutoff of 159 hertz, and so I have this on just about every track. And so the reason I would have it on every track is that any instrument that really isn't a bass tone, that doesn't require those low frequencies below, say 150, 200, you can go ahead and roll that off, and it helps create room and keep things a little bit cleaner. So for example, I dropped in some samples here just to give you an example of what this sounds like and the difference of it. So I have so you can hear a very subtle difference. I'll even go up a little bit higher, so it's off. Alright, so I have this air filter on every one of my pads here. So I'm gonna go, I do have it set up on my bass as well, but I'll just have that muted out. And if I wanted to, I could use the air filter to roll off some some of the high end rather than letting the highs pass through and taking out the lows. So, all right, so the next plugin that I have in line after my filter is also another EQ. I have the Air Parametric EQ. And the reason why I have this one in here, maybe if I want to also do some more subtractive EQ. So I want to cut some frequencies out there that are kind of harsh. So I'll just put this one in right after that so that I can get more specific and like cut out a frequency range. So you could do that with by setting your frequency and then setting your Q and then kind of just notching out that frequency that's harsh and really kind of nasty and you don't want it to be there. So, and these are kind of rule of thumbs that I've learned along the way and research for yourself. Most engineers would say that there aren't any rules, but these are guidelines because depending on the way that you have your plugin order, it does affect the sound that you're going to come out with. But yeah, I'm just putting it into practice. So the next plugin that I have in here is a compressor. And the reason why the compressor is coming after the EQs is that you don't want to compress frequencies that you're going to cut out anyways, because then you're going to end up having to cut them out again and you're adding to the frequency, if that makes sense. So you want to do your EQ cuts prior to your compression, and then my next plugin would be another EQ. So that EQ would be if you want to enhance some of the sound, bring some of the low end back in, or some of the mid range. You want to do this after your compressor, just as a general rule of thumb. Alright, so moving back out to the pad mixer. From here, to get to the submixes, I want to look over here to the bottom where it says route. So by default, everything is routed through the program. And so taking a look at my pads, I got everything color coded, so I have them in groups. So I want to put like instruments through the same submix. So starting with my sample chops, all these 4 pads right here, I'm going to click on one, and then I'm going to scroll until I find submix 1, and then I'm just going to do that for every one of these. I want to put my drums through submix 2, so every one of those. One. And then I'll do the basses on 3. And do 4 for other instruments. Okay. So now all like instruments are going through their own submix. And so now I want to go over to channel mixer. Then click on my mixer, scroll over till I see submixes, and then looking down here I can select a submix, and then also I have on my I could put inserts on my submix. So I mainly just have a compressor on each one of my submixes at the moment, so I have room to add a few more inserts, and I'll do that as this mix template progresses. Again, so I'm using the compressor to give more of a cohesiveness to these submixes and to the types of instruments that are playing through them. And I think it sounds great for drums, to keep everything up front, kind of in your face, kind of sounding like real in your ear. Anyways, and also another reason you'd have a submix is that you can control the level of each one of your submixes. So you can bring all your drums down, or bring all your basses down, bring all your other like instruments or samples down. So that's the reason why I have that set up like that. So I really just have one more thing to show you all, and that is my master track, my master bus. So let's go over, click on mixer, and then turn until it says master. I click on my inserts, and I will Turn these on one by one. So like I said, on my master, I'm already needing more than just the 4 inserts. So I decided to use the air channel strip on my first insert, because the air channel strip is kind of a combination of a few things that I have that I'm using commonly already. So I have EQ, I have a high pass filter down here, and then I also have some compression. I have gate, which I haven't really gotten into, but I have my EQ and I have my compression. So I've covered 2 inserts in one by using the air channel strip. I also have on my second insert, I have another air parametric EQ, so I can do some more notch filtering if necessary. And the reason why I put that one in there is because I have more control in here than I do on the channel strip. On the channel strip, I have a high shelf, I have a mid and low frequency, so I don't have as many options. Here I have pretty much 4 different kind of ranges of frequencies that I can control. So that's there just in case I need it. On my third insert, I have an air stereo width. This gives more depth in the stereo field. Something I just been kind of experimenting with, and I like it. It does give a whole nother element to my whole master and my stereo mix. And then last but not least, I have an air maximizer, which is like a limiter, which is a mastering tool, so that I can kind of get the loudest possible sound and get a basic rough master, the best that I can do, you know. So taking a look in there, I'll just look at it briefly because I don't have many settings. I set the threshold to 0, and I did this with my compressors on every other thing. I have everything kind of zeroed out so that I can make any changes for, you know, specifically that beat, whatever beat I'm creating. So the only thing that I have set here is my ceiling, and it's set to negative 0.1 dB because I don't want it to go over 0, so that it's not clipping. And that's pretty much it. Just mess around that threshold. That's my template. So I hope y'all got something out of this. Maybe you expected more, but you know, it's my learning process too, and I just wanted to share it with all you guys. So if you're at the same point that I am, or you know, I just believe that sharing helps people get inspired, because sometimes we don't necessarily think the same way, and it's helpful to be able to help each other out, you know, from having different perspectives. The whole point of creating these templates is to avoid redundant steps, to save on valuable time, to become more efficient and productive, to increase the quantity of our creative work while still retaining a quality of work. My goal is to develop a consistency of finishing beats by developing a process that makes mixing part of my creativity rather than a tedious technical aspect of music production. Now, mixing may not be as tedious to some as it is to me, but just having this template in place will ensure the probability of me actually finishing projects. So that's the goal. And that's all I had to say for today. So thanks y'all for joining me. My name is Raul. This has been Lifted Noise. Stay humble. God bless. Peace.